Hey everyone, welcome to HFY Galactic Empire Fall. Real human stories, nothing more artificial. Because HFY begins with humanity. I'm Naira Solis. Subscribe, the signal starts now. The calibration strip stopped halfway out of the printer and stayed there. Mira looked at it for a moment without touching it. The thin white length hung from the slot in a clean line. Not bent, not torn. Simply paused as if the machine had changed its mind. A second later, the printer gave a soft internal click and pushed the rest of the strip free. She took it between two fingers, checked the numbers, then laid it flat beside the ceramic dish where she kept screws that did not belong to anything anymore. Across the room, Oren had one boot up on the lower rail of an equipment rack, tightening a panel latch with a driver whose handle had been worn smooth by years of use. He did not look over when she said, "Again." He finished the turn first, backed the tool out, set it on the shelf. "The printer?" he asked. Mira held up the strip. He came over, wiping his fingers on a folded cloth from his pocket. He read the line of timing marks, glanced at the printer, then at the wall clock above the sealed inner hatch. Same delay. 0.8 this time. Oren bent, opened the maintenance access, and watched the feed mechanism settle. The machine gave no sign of trouble. Its status light stayed green, exact and unbothered. Mira slid into her chair and pulled a report window across the central monitor. Outside the station's forward glass, Neptune remained where it always was, enormous and patient, blue so dark it looked almost manufactured. The storm belt along the lower hemisphere had thinned over the last week. She had been watching that too. On the desk lay 3 paper printouts, each clipped at the corner. They were not necessary. The station archive existed in 6 redundant layers, none of which had ever failed. Mira still printed certain anomalies. She said the hand noticed what screens forgave. She aligned the fresh strip against the other 2. All 3 showed the same thing. A processing delay in the deep array timing loop, each one slightly longer than the last. Oren closed the printer panel with the heel of his hand. Could be drift from the outer dishes. It isn't drift. You already checked. I checked the dish clocks, the relay, and the buffer stack. Then I checked the checks again because I thought I was being careful in the wrong direction. He pulled the spare chair closer but did not sit. He leaned over her shoulder instead, one hand on the backrest, one on the desk near the printouts, careful not to touch them. Mira expanded the signal trace. A faint, regular offset ran beneath the array's standard survey sweep. Not noise, not exactly data either. Something inside the timing architecture had begun answering before it was addressed, then correcting itself so neatly that most systems treated it as rounding error. "If you smooth it," she said, "it disappears. So don't smooth it." "That is what I've been doing all morning." He straightened and picked up the top printout. The paper made a dry sound in the quiet room. "You tell command yet?" "No." "Why not?" Mira lifted the strip, then put it back down again in better alignment with the others. "Because I'd like to know whether I'm reporting a fault or a sentence." Oren took that in without expression. He was a large man but never took up more room than he had to. He returned the sheet to the desk exactly where it had been. "Run it through local isolation," he said. "I did. Hard isolation." She looked up at him. "That drops the survey queue. That drops the queue." Mira turned to the monitor again. The station's long-range system had spent 8 months mapping cold bodies beyond the last confirmed chart limit. Not discovery in the old sense. More refinement than revelation. Shapes, masses, trajectories. Most days the work arrived in neat columns. Numbers with no need for interpretation. Today the numbers had started waiting before she called them. She reached for the headset on its stand, stopped, and touched the cable instead. "If I take the array offline without explanation, Jalen will send 3 messages marked urgent and 1 marked routine, and the routine one will be the one that matters. Then give him explanation." Mira smiled once without amusement. "You should have done my job." "I do my job." He left the chair where it was and moved to the side console. A tray there held the fine tools, labeled in Myra's handwriting years ago when the station first went operational and both of them still believed labels prevented disorder. He selected a narrow driver, then set it back and chose another. She opened a secure channel and began a draft she did not send. Timing irregularity in deep array synchrony. Reproducible. Source currently unknown. Local investigation underway. She stared at the line, then closed the draft. From the vent above the diagnostics wall came the low, steady rush of recycled air. Every 16 seconds it changed pitch by a small degree because one of the internal vanes never fully reset. Oren had meant to fix it for 2 years. Now the sound had become part of the station's shape. Mira often noticed its absence in her sleep more than its presence while awake. Oren unfastened the faceplate from the timing module and rested the screws in a neat row on a square of dark cloth. "You ate?" he asked. "No." He nodded as if this confirmed something technical. "I'll make tea when this is open." She knew he would. He only made tea when the station moved into a problem large enough to require paper, or tools, or silence. There was a hierarchy to his methods. Mira sent a narrow diagnostic challenge directly to the deep array relay. The answer returned before the system log marked the request as sent. She sat still. Then she sent another. Same result. Oren. He looked over without pausing his work. "It's happening inside the timestamp layer. That possible?" "No." He gave the faintest shrug. In Oren's grammar, that meant only that impossibility had failed inspection before. "Show me." She mirrored the log to his side screen. He crossed over, bent close, and placed both hands flat on the desk. The left index finger tapped once next to the sequence marker, not touching the display, only indicating the place where the order broke. Could be cache bleed. Across a locked internal clock? Could be if we're unlucky. Mira sent the same challenge through the backup route. Again the answer appeared first. Neither of them spoke for several seconds. Then Oren stood upright and said, "Hard isolation." This time she nodded. She keyed the sequence. Across the room, the status board shifted from survey green to maintenance amber. Outside the station, nothing changed. Neptune kept its place. The stars remained thin and cold beyond the glass. The isolation routine progressed through its steps. Relay separation, cache purge, timestamp reset, local-only permissions. At step 9, the screen held. No error, no warning, just a line that should have turned over and did not. Mira watched the seconds collect. The station clock advanced. The routine stayed where it was. Then the line completed itself all at once, and another line appeared below it. Archive object present. She did not move at first. Not because she was startled. Because the wording was wrong. Survey systems did not say object when referring to data artifacts. They said packet, block, file, collision, fragment, ghost. Object belonged to physical inventory, to cargo and sealed containers and recovered hardware. Oren leaned in again. Where? She opened the route marker. The screen populated with coordinates. Not relative, not local, not in any reference frame the station used in daily operation. They were old stellar anchors, the kind employed in early deep exploration before current lattice navigation made such things mostly ceremonial. Mira knew the pattern anyway. Every long-range analyst did, the same way a musician knows an obsolete key signature. She ran a conversion. The answer appeared in silence. Oren read it over her shoulder. That can't be right, he said. Mira checked the anchor set manually. Her fingers moved faster now, but not wildly. She corrected for drift, for historical catalog revision, for the dead reference beacon at Kuiper Gate 6 that still contaminated archival math if one forgot to remove it. Same result. Oren dragged the spare chair around and sat. He only sat when a problem had decided to stay. Run it again, he said. She did. The coordinate resolved to empty space well beyond the current edge of confirmed survey. Not theoretical empty. Uncharted empty. The kind of darkness that still belonged more to equations than to names. At its center sat a registry tag. Mira read it once. Then again. Human archive object. Personal/paper/bound. Condition. Buried. Recovery status. Pending. Oren reached past her and touched the screen border, as if the frame itself might be warm. Paper. That's what it says. Buried where? She opened the subordinate field. Planetary substrate, silicate composition, shallow depth, 0.8 meters. A surface world. Unregistered. Unseen. She looked toward the glass, though there was nothing outside that could answer the problem now. Personal, Oren said quietly. Mira was already in the registry structure. Old coding. Very old. Not pre-expansion, but close enough that the syntax still treated ownership as category. She followed the chain through deprecated archive paths, watched obsolete permissions refuse her, then surrender under station authority they were too old to recognize as invalid. A manifest opened. Not a file. Not an image. A retrieval note. The language was clipped and practical. Item logged from future field recovery. Return to origin unresolved. Temporal conflict acknowledged. Hold in buried state until reference civilization acquires path. Do not duplicate. Mira read the line twice before the meaning arranged itself. Oren had gone very still beside her. Future field recovery, he said. Yes. Meaning. She swallowed once, not visibly enough to count as a gesture. Meaning someone cataloged a human paper object from a recovery site that, according to the coordinates, no one has reached yet. Someone human? The archive prefix is. That isn't the same thing. No. The vent changed pitch overhead. Somewhere deeper in the station a relay clicked. The room held itself together through habit. Mira opened the metadata block. Date of burial. Redacted. Recovery observer. Redacted. Civilization status. Not in contact. Planetary survey status. Not in contact. She frowned. That's not a systems phrase. What phrase? Not in contact. Survey status should be undiscovered, unregistered, unresolved. Not in contact sounds like a person decided to write the field. Oren looked at the ceramic dish of loose screws, then at the printouts aligned beside it, then back to the screen. His attention often moved that way when he was solving something. Object, pattern, object again. Open the object descriptor. She did. For a second the screen stayed blank. Then a simple line rendered in old archive font. Bound paper journal. Fabric spine. Handwritten contents. Exterior marked with initials. EV. Neither of them spoke. Mira knew no EV. She ran a registry crosscheck anyway. Too broad. Thousands of historical personnel with matching initials. Some civilian. Some fleet. Some lost in transit records so old they had become legends only to the departments that stored them. She narrowed by archive age. Narrowed by format preference. Narrowed by field recovery likelihood. The list collapsed from thousands to 13. Oren stood and went to the galley niche without a word. Mira heard the kettle fill. Heard it set onto the induction ring. Heard the cupboard open and the small tin lid lift. He brought her tea in the gray cup with the hairline crack near the handle. He always used that one for her, though the station had 4 identical cups and only he could reliably tell them apart at a glance. She took it and set it down without drinking. The cup left a neat circle of condensation beside the newest calibration strip. Whoever wrote this, Oren said, remaining standing, didn't want it copied. Apparently. Do you think the object is real? Mira looked at the line again. Personal. Paper. Bound. A diary if someone less careful had written the manifest. Real enough to disturb our timing system, she said. That wasn't my question. She wrapped her fingers around the cup. The heat moved slowly into her hand. Yes, she said after a moment. I think something is real. I don't know if it's the object, the record, or the instruction. Oren accepted that. She opened the unsent message to command and deleted it. Started again. Deep array isolation revealed unauthorized archive object with obsolete human registry markers. Coordinates correspond to an uncharted planetary body beyond current survey boundary. Metadata indicates future recovery and intentional burial. Requesting sealed review and immediate navigation audit. She stopped at the last line. Added one more. Recommend no broad distribution until local verification of archive integrity. Oren watched her type. You think this leaks if it spreads? I think people make noise around paradoxes. And noise makes errors. Yes. She sent the message. The confirmation tone was soft, almost polite. Then the main monitor dimmed by 1 degree, restored itself, and opened a new window without input from either of them. Not a system alert. Not a breach flag. Just a plain text line, centered on the screen. Do not arrive early. Mira set the cup down carefully enough that no tea crossed the rim. Oren did not reach for the console. He looked at the words, then at the timestamp in the corner, then at Mira. The line remained for 3 seconds. Then it was gone. In the glass beyond the station, Neptune turned imperceptibly in its dark. Neither of them spoke. On the desk, the calibration strip lay straight beside the ceramic dish, and the steam from the cracked cup thinned into the dry air until it could no longer be seen. Oren was the first to move. He stepped past Mira and cut the external uplink before the station could decide to be helpful. The indicator over the comm panel went from blue to a narrow red bar. No outgoing cue, no passive mirror, no automatic relay to command beyond the message she had already sent. Mira did not ask why. She was already opening the local event stack, tracing the text line backward through the station's memory layers. The screen still held the last normal system view. Diagnostics in one column, archive metadata in another, clock in the upper right, steady and indifferent. No source path, no executable trail. Just a gap in the record where the message had appeared and been removed too cleanly to count as deletion. Oren stood with one hand on the comm switch for another second, as if confirming it stayed where he had put it. Then he came back to the desk, pulled the spare chair closer and sat. Message got out before I closed it? He asked. The report did. The other line? I don't know. She enlarged the event log. If it went anywhere, it didn't use station routing. That's worse. Yes. The tea had cooled enough to drink. She took a sip and set the cup down in the same damp ring it had already made. On the desk, the calibration strips remained aligned like small pieces of evidence no one had asked for yet. Oren read the empty interval on the log as if blank space might declare itself under pressure. It did not. Could be display injection, he said. From what? From the archive object. Or whatever is pretending to be one. That still leaves the question of how. He looked at the timing trace. Maybe that's the wrong question. Mira turned slightly toward him. Go on. He rested both forearms on his knees. If something can answer before the request exists, it doesn't need the route we're checking. It only needs to be where the route ends up. She let that sit in the room a moment. Which means, she said, the message didn't come through the station. It came from wherever the station would eventually look. Mira glanced at the coordinates again. Uncharted world. Silicate surface. Shallow burial. Human paper journal. Future field recovery. She had spent enough years around bad data to distrust any chain that assembled itself too neatly. This one was not neat. That made it harder. On the wall display, the isolation state held. Deep array offline. Local diagnostics only. The station had narrowed itself to a single room's worth of thinking. Open the NAV audit, Oren said. She did. The station had no flight authority of its own beyond station keeping. That was standard. Research stations were not trusted with ambition. But every survey platform kept partial navigation architecture for verification, and Halcyon had more than partial because it had been assembled out of older systems no one had fully bothered to simplify. Mira ran the coordinates through the NAV layer instead of the archive layer. The result came back with a projected path, faint and incomplete, a line threaded through empty sectors and uncommitted math. The system drew it anyway, as if the destination had been waiting longer than the rules that should have prevented the drawing. Oren leaned closer. There. A waypoint glowed midway through the route. Not official. Not logged. Not labeled. Mira selected it. No response. She selected it again, harder, which changed nothing. Oren reached across and used the physical keyboard instead of the touch layer. The waypoint opened. A maintenance note appeared in plain station text. Trajectory correction required to preserve burial interval. Neither of them said anything for several seconds. Then Mira opened the file header. This was written from inside the station. Oren took that in without visible reaction. When? She checked. No creation time. No editor stamp. No user signature. Only a checksum that matched nothing in Halcyon's current registry. She let out a breath through her nose. Either the system is assembling convincing lies, or this station has a memory we haven't lived through yet. Oren stood and went to the forward glass. He did that when he needed distance but not escape. Hands in his pockets, shoulders still. He watched Neptune's edge cut across the dark. Mira knew what he was looking at. Not the planet, but the reflection over it. Desk light, chair backs, amber diagnostics. The two of them suspended in the glass like a second room laid over the first. When the station ran quiet enough, you could mistake the reflection for the truer space. She printed the maintenance note. The printer accepted the job at once this time. No delay. The sheet came through in a smooth motion and settled in the tray. Mira picked it up, felt its warmth, and added it to the desk, waiting one corner with the ceramic dish. On the paper, the sentence looked worse. Not because it was more real, but because someone had chosen words instead of code. Preserve burial interval. Person's phrase. Oren returned from the glass. We should assume the report to command is already enough to start questions. It will take them 32 minutes to realize I closed the link. 30 if Jalen is awake. He's always awake when it's inconvenient. Oren almost smiled. Then he looked at the paper in her hand. If command asks what we found? Mira set the sheet down. We tell them we found a corrupted archive, event tied to an impossible coordinate. That true? Yes. Complete? No. He nodded once. That was agreement, not approval. She reopened the personnel crosscheck for EV-13 candidates. 7 civilian researchers, 2 expedition recorders, 1 educator attached to the Colonial Language Initiative, 3 field cartographers. She sorted by date, then by region, then by preference tags buried in old biography archives most people never read. 1 file stayed near the top no matter how she filtered. Vas, alien. Field cartographer. Special assignment record incomplete. Known materials preference. Paper notebooks. Status. Missing during outer survey phase 3. Mira stopped scrolling. Oren saw the stillness before he saw the file. What? She rotated the screen toward him. He read the brief summary and said nothing. Then, how old? 203 years. Missing where? In the phase 3 fringe. Before the current lattice routes. He read the line about paper notebooks twice. That's thin. It's not nothing. No. She opened the partial archive. Most of it had degraded into reference skeletons and broken links, but a few personal notes remained because old bureaucracies preserved the wrong things out of habit. Requested continued access to bound field journals after standard transition to voice capture. Reason, spatial thought better resolved by hand. Another note, repeated disagreement with predictive routing assumptions. Another, last transmission received after declared signal loss window. Content fragment unavailable. Oren pulled the chair around and sat again, closer this time. Predictive routing, he said. Mira nodded. The kettle in the galley had cooled. The air from the vent shifted pitch again. Somewhere below the floor a pump turned over with the same mild complaint it always made at low cycle. The station was very good at continuing around a problem. She brought up the old Phase 3 survey corridor and laid the impossible coordinates over it. They sat near the historical edge of Elian Voss's last assigned sector. Not exactly within it. Near enough to trouble the definition of coincidence. Oren put a fingertip on the map, not touching the display. Command will send a ship. Not quickly. Still, Mira knew he was right. Even caution had momentum once enough departments were involved. A future archive object tied to a missing surveyor and an uncharted world was more than enough to wake the wrong parts of the institution. She looked at the line of text they had printed. Trajectory correction required to preserve burial interval. If the message on the screen had been instruction, this one was procedure. Whoever wrote this, she said, assumed we would have a trajectory to correct. Oren leaned back slightly. Maybe Halcyon does. We don't have a drive. We have route modeling. She followed the thought before he finished it. You mean the station is being used as a planning point? Maybe more than planning. He rose, crossed to the lower systems cabinet, and knelt by the old access panel no one opened unless a failure forced it. For latches, too older than the station's current revision. He released them in order, folded the panel down, and exposed the manual bus assembly. Mira turned in her chair. What are you doing? Checking what this place was built from. It's a station. It was assembled from decommissioned survey frames, relay architecture, and whatever accounting allowed. You told me that in the first week. I was trying to impress you. You were trying to make a point. He ran a flashlight beam along the component tags. Some were clean station issue. Others wore older serial plates beneath new paint. After a moment he looked up. Here. Mira left the desk and crouched beside him. On the lower mount, half covered by a newer housing bracket, an older stamp remained visible. Long Path Survey Navigation Buffer, Cartographic Class. She stared at it. This shouldn't still exist, she said. But it does. Not active. Oren checked the power bus. Depends what active means. She reached in, brushed a thumb across the old stamp, and came away with a fine line of dust. The metal underneath felt colder than the surrounding frame. Pull the module state, she said. He shifted aside. She connected a portable reader and queried the unit. The first response failed. The second returned a dormant architecture map far denser than any station needed. Predictive track memory. Correction holds. Deferred waypoint logic. Burial tolerance. No, not burial, she had read too quickly. Buffer tolerance. Still, the adjacency made her skin tighten along the wrists. Why would a station keep this? Oren asked. It wouldn't. Not intentionally. So someone left it. Or needed it. She looked back toward the main desk. The printed note seemed to wait there. Oren closed the access panel halfway but did not latch it. If this module was part of an old survey frame, then Halcyon may have inherited route memory from something that once flew. And if that something flew near those coordinates? Mira finished it. It might recognize a future archive marker as a destination class. They returned to the desk. She fed the old module's architecture into the NAV audit. The route line sharpened. Secondary corrections appeared. The unlabeled waypoint gained context fields, most of them unreadable, some of them plain enough. Arrival window. Surface stability. Observer separation. Mira read the third line twice. Observer separation. Oren saw it too. Meaning? She did not answer at once. On another day, in another problem, she would have said it meant sensor standoff or contamination distance or line-of-sight clearance. But the message on the screen had not felt written by a system that respected narrow meanings. Meaning someone expected the people arriving and the person burying the object to be close enough that it mattered, she said. Oren stood still beside her. Same person. I don't know. Would you say it if you did? She glanced at him. There was no accusation in the question. Only measurement. No, she said. That was enough for him. The comm panel blinked once. An inbound request, denied by link closure, stored in local queue. Then another. Then a third. 30 minutes, Oren said. Mira checked the clock. 27. He gave the smallest nod, as if pleased not to have overestimated anyone. She opened a local recorder and began speaking, not loudly. Station Halcyon. Internal note. Deep array isolation revealed an archive object with temporal contradiction markers. Associated route data appears to interact with dormant long-path navigation architecture embedded in legacy station hardware. Working hypothesis. The archive event is not random corruption, but a preserved instruction attached to a future recovery path. She stopped the recording. Oren waited. Mira added, private until verified. Then she saved it to local-only storage and printed that too. You trust paper more than the system now, he said. I trust paper to stay where I put it. He looked at the desk. The gray cup, the strips, the 2 fresh sheets, the dish of screws holding one corner down. For now, she accepted that. The inbound queue blinked again. Jalen, almost certainly. Then command adjunct. Then probably Jalen again using a different priority flag because he disliked being ignored by machines. Mira muted the light. A long minute passed. She reopened Elian Voss's partial file and found the only surviving image. An identification frame, old and slightly blurred at the edges. Narrow face. Dark hair cut short without much care. One sleeve rolled higher than the other. On the desk in the image, barely visible, sat a paper notebook with a fabric spine. Evie. Oren studied the image, then the object descriptor, then the impossible coordinates. Finally he said, "If this is real, the diary gets buried because someone chooses to bury it." Yes. And if the note is right, the timing matters. Yes. He put one hand on the back of Myra's chair. Then the question isn't whether command comes. She knew the next part before he said it. It's whether they arrive too early, she said. Neither of them moved for a while after that. The station remained quiet around them. The vent breathed. The dim lights held. Neptune turned beyond the glass with the same distant patience. On the desk, the paper edges no longer looked temporary. They looked arranged. Mira reached for the cracked cup and found the tea cold. The monitor's refresh line hesitated once across the lower edge, then completed the sweep as if nothing had interrupted it. Mira noticed it because she had been watching the clock, not the data. The clock did not hesitate. She leaned forward, adjusted the display brightness by a single increment, then set it back. The room settled again into its usual level of light. Oren had not moved from where he stood behind her chair. One hand rested on the backrest, fingers spread just enough to keep contact without gripping. It was a position he held when he was waiting for something that might not happen again if he looked directly at it. "Did you see it?" she asked. "No. It dragged. System load. We're isolated." He considered that. "Then it's local." Mira opened the refresh diagnostics. No anomalies. No dropped frames. No indication that the screen had behaved in any way other than expected. She closed the panel. On the desk, the paper sheets had shifted by less than a millimeter. She corrected them, aligning the top edges with the seam in the desk surface. The ceramic dish pressed one corner down. The cracked cup left a second ring beside the first. Oren watched her hands, not the paper. "You think the system is learning our attention?" he asked. "I think the system is responding to something that isn't constrained by sequence. That's the same thing with different words." "Not quite." She opened the navigation audit again. The route line remained, faint but steady. The unlabeled waypoint still held its borrowed context fields. Arrival window, surface stability, observer separation. No new entries. "Check the timing layer," Oren said. She did. The deep array remained isolated. No external input. The internal clock advanced without drift. The earlier irregularity had flattened, as if the system had decided that whatever it had been doing no longer needed to be visible. "That's worse," he said when she showed him. "Yes." "Why?" "Because now we have a behavior that appears only when it's useful." Oren nodded once. He moved away from the chair and crossed to the side console, picking up the driver he had set down earlier, then putting it back again without using it. "Command Q?" he asked. Mira glanced at the muted indicator. "For messages. Pattern. First 2 close together. Then a gap. Then 2 more. Jalen, then command, then Jalen again," Oren said. "Probably. Do we open it?" "Not yet." He accepted that without argument. Mira pulled the personnel file for Elian Voss back onto the main screen and expanded the fragment notes. Most of the data remained broken, but one section had been preserved because it had been stored redundantly in 2 separate systems that no longer agreed on anything except this. Field note, partial transcription. Mapping line refuses to hold. Predictions assume path is fixed. Path changes when recorded. The rest of the line had collapsed into unreadable characters. Mira read it twice. Oren leaned in. That's not a normal complaint. No. Sounds like someone arguing with their tools. She was a cartographer, Mira said. Arguing with tools was part of the job. He watched her for a second. You think she's right. I think she noticed something we're seeing in a different form. He straightened. Which is? That sequence isn't stable if something outside the sequence is paying attention. Oren let that settle. So writing it down changes it. Possibly. Then burying it might be the only way to preserve it. They both looked at the printed note on the desk. Trajectory correction required to preserve burial interval. Oren exhaled once, quietly. We're assuming a lot. Yes. And we don't have the object. No. He crossed to the galley and poured the remaining cold tea into the sink. The sound of it against the metal basin was soft and brief. He rinsed the cup, set it upside down on the rack, then filled it again and placed it on the induction ring. Mira watched the movement without turning her head fully. Small actions repeated, the station's way of holding shape. The comm indicator blinked once more, then held steady. No new messages. She opened the inbound queue without restoring the link. For headers appeared. Jalen priority urgent. Command adjunct priority review. Jalen priority routine. Command priority direct. She selected the third one first. Oren noticed but did not comment. The message opened in a small window. Mira, I know you closed the link. That means you saw something you don't want interpreted early. Don't let them write it before you understand it. I'll hold the room as long as I can. Send me one line if you need time. J. Mira read it once, then closed it. Good man, Oren said. Yes. What do you send him? She thought for a moment, then typed. Local anomaly. Requires containment. She queued it but did not send. Why not? Oren asked. Because once I send it, he acts on it. He's already acting. Yes, but not yet with my words. Oren accepted that distinction. The kettle clicked softly as it reached temperature. He poured fresh tea and brought the cup to the desk, placing it just to the right of the previous condensation ring. Mira moved the new cup slightly left so it aligned with the seam. Oren sat again, closer than before. Let's assume the archive is real, he said. Let's assume Voss buried a diary on a world no one had charted yet. Let's assume the burial matters in time. Mira nodded. What does arrive early mean in that context? She considered the route line, the waypoint, the arrival window. It means there's a moment when the object should not yet exist for us, she said. If we reach the site before that moment, we change whatever led to the burial. And if we arrive after, we might still change it, but in a way the system has already accounted for. Accounted how? By placing the instruction here, in our hands. Now, Oren looked at the paper again. Then the instruction is part of the event it's trying to protect. Yes. He leaned back slightly, which means ignoring it is also part of the event. Mira allowed herself a small nod. Possibly. He was quiet for a few seconds, then said, I don't like systems that assume compliance. Neither do I. The monitor refreshed again. This time it did not hesitate. The line moved smoothly across the bottom edge. Mira opened the route simulation and ran a timing projection without committing to a path. The system calculated silently, then returned a set of windows, each one a narrow band of possibility rather than a fixed schedule. Oren studied them. Those are tight. They get tighter if you include the correction note. Show me. She added the correction constraint. The windows collapsed further, leaving only two viable arrival bands. One of them lay within a span that command could plausibly reach if they accelerated a survey vessel under priority conditions. The other lay beyond that, requiring delay. Which one preserves the burial? Oren asked. Mira pointed to the later window. He nodded once. Then command will aim for the first. Yes, because they won't accept delay without reason. And we don't have one they'll accept. He stood and walked back to the forward glass. This time he did not look at the reflection. He looked directly at the dark beyond Neptune. as if distance itself might offer leverage. Mira watched him for a moment, then returned to the personnel file. She opened the last transmission note. Last transmission received after declared signal loss window. Content fragment unavailable. Unavailable. Not lost. Not corrupted. Unavailable. She searched for any residual data fragments tied to that transmission. Most paths returned nothing. One returned a single byte string, flagged as non-reconstructible. She opened it anyway. The system displayed a line of characters that resolved, then re-resolved into a different set, then settled on something readable. Wait until it stays. The line flickered once, then held. Mira did not call Oren over immediately. She watched the text for a full minute, as if it might change again if she acknowledged it. It did not. Oren, she said quietly. He came back, reading her face before he read the screen. He leaned in. Wait until it stays. He read. Yes. He did not ask where it came from. Consistent with the rest, he said. Too consistent. He nodded. They stood there together looking at the line. After a while, Oren said, if sequence changes under observation, then stability might require not acting at the first available moment. Mira finished. He gestured toward the route windows, which aligns with the later band. Yes. And contradicts command's likely choice. Yes. They were quiet again. The station continued its small, reliable motions. The vent breathed. The pump turned. The lights held. On the desk, the papers remained aligned. The new cup steamed gently, untouched. Mira reached out and moved the top sheet a fraction of a millimeter, bringing its edge perfectly flush with the one beneath it. Then she said, we can't stop command from coming. No. But we can change what arriving means. Oren looked at her. How? He asked. She turned the screen so he could see the route architecture again, including the dormant long-path module now integrated into the simulation. We redefine the waypoint, she said. Into what? Into something that holds them until the later window is the only viable one. Oren studied the structure. You're talking about inserting a correction they'll trust. Yes. And you think they'll follow it. They follow stability. He considered that. And if we're wrong? He asked. Mira looked at the line on the screen. Wait until it stays. She did not answer directly. Instead, she reached for the cup, took a small sip of tea, and set it down again exactly where it had been. Then she said, then we'll know we moved too early. Oren held her gaze for a moment, then nodded. Show me where to place it, he said. The seam in the floor panel near the console lifted by a fraction, then settled back into place without sound. Mira noticed it because her foot was resting across it. The shift was too small to feel through the sole, but she saw the line change. A hair's width, no more. When she leaned forward, it returned to its usual alignment as if it had never moved. She did not mention it immediately. Oren was standing behind her, watching the route structure expand across the monitor. The dormant navigation module had begun to expose deeper layers now that it had been queried twice. Old fields appeared with names that did not belong to the station's current vocabulary. Deferred hold, path coherence, observer offset. He read them silently. Start here, Mira said, tapping the empty space just before the existing waypoint. Oren leaned closer. Before. If we insert after, they'll treat it as correction. If we insert before, they'll treat it as necessity. He considered that. And they won't question necessity. They'll question it later. Later is what we need. She opened the edit interface. It resisted for a moment, then accepted input in a format that felt older than the rest of the system, less strict about syntax, more dependent on intention. Oren noticed the difference. This isn't current code. No. Feels like notes pretending to be code. That's what older systems did when they didn't trust their own rigidity. He watched her hands. She did not type quickly. Each character went in with a small pause before the next, as if she were placing something that might not stay if rushed. What are you writing? He asked. Not writing. Arranging. He let that stand. On the screen, A new marker appeared in faint outline. Not solid yet. Not recognized. Mira adjusted the parameters. Arrival condition. Unstable. Sensor return. Inconsistent. Path confirmation. Delayed. Oren shifted his weight. They'll see that as interference. They'll see it as something that needs to be resolved before approach. And they'll try to resolve it. Yes. Which buys time. Yes. He nodded once. Mira added one more line, hesitated, then left it without label. A simple constraint. Wait until stable. She did not attach it to any system field. It existed alongside the others, visible but not bound to a specific process. Oren saw it. They'll ignore that, he said. They might. Why include it? Because the system won't. He watched her for a second longer, then looked back at the screen. The marker flickered once, then solidified. The route adjusted. Not dramatically, just enough that the first arrival window narrowed further, becoming less efficient, less appealing to a system trained to optimize. The second window remained. Oren exhaled quietly. That's subtle. It needs to be. He stepped back, then forward again, as if checking the change from two different distances. Will it hold? He asked. Mira glanced at the timing layer. The earlier irregularity had not returned, but something in the background now felt organized. Not active, not intrusive, but aware in the way a room can feel aware when someone else is in it and not moving. I don't know, she said. Then we watch. Yes. He moved to the side console and picked up the driver again, turning it once in his hand before setting it down exactly where it had been. The comm panel blinked. Another message queued. Mira did not look at it immediately. Instead, she printed the updated route parameters. The printer accepted the job, paused for a fraction, less than before, and released the page. She took it, smoothed it flat, and placed it beside the others. For sheets now, all aligned. Oren watched the placement. You're building a record. I'm building something that doesn't change when the system decides to be helpful. He nodded. The comm panel blinked again. Open it, he said. Mira turned the indicator back on without restoring the full link. The queued messages remained local. She opened the latest one. Command, priority direct. The text was concise. Halcyon, confirm anomaly classification. Provide immediate coordinate lock. Survey vessel already in acceleration phase. ETA preliminary. Oren read it over her shoulder. They're moving, he said. Yes. Faster than expected. Not really. She closed the message and opened the route projection again. The system had already adjusted to the incoming trajectory. A faint line now approached from the inner lattice, projected through the same space their own route occupied. The first arrival window aligned with it. The second did not. Oren leaned in. They're aiming for the early window. Yes. Can they see our correction? They'll see the instability marker. And they'll try to resolve it. He nodded once. Send Jalen the line, he said. Mira reopened the queued message. Local anomaly. Requires containment. She added 2 words. Delay recommended. Then she sent it. The transmission left the station in a narrow, controlled burst. Oren watched the comm panel settle. Now he acts, he said. Yes. They both knew what that meant. Questions redirected. Authority slowed. Not stopped, but bent. Mira returned to the screen. The approaching trajectory shifted slightly. Not enough to change its intent. Enough to show that someone on the other end had seen something worth considering. Jalen, Oren said. Yes. The room grew quieter after that. Not because anything stopped, but because attention had narrowed. Mira watched the route lines. Oren watched the paper on the desk. After a minute, he said, if the diary is buried at a specific moment. Yes. And the burial depends on the path taken. Yes. Then whoever buried it needed the path to remain uncertain until the right time. Mira nodded. And this, he gestured at the screen, the paper, the station itself, is part of that uncertainty. Yes. He looked at her. And we're inside it. She met his gaze. Yes. Neither of them moved for a while. The vent shifted pitch. The light above the console dimmed by a degree, then returned. On the desk, the top sheet lifted slightly at one corner, then settled again under the weight of the ceramic dish. Mira adjusted it anyway. Oren watched the movement. You think small corrections matter, he said. They accumulate. He nodded. The monitor refreshed again. This time, the line paused for a fraction longer than before, then continued. Mira did not look at it directly. She kept her attention on the route. Tell me when it repeats, Oren said. It might not. Then tell me when it doesn't. She almost smiled. The incoming trajectory shifted again. A minor adjustment. A hesitation in the projected path. Not a change of destination. A reconsideration of approach. Jalen's working, Oren said. Yes. Command. Watching. He leaned back slightly, hands resting on the edge of the desk. If they commit to the delay, they won't call it that. What will they call it? Verification. He nodded once. Same thing, he said. Mira did not disagree. She opened the archive object metadata again. The lines remained unchanged. Bound paper journal. Fabric spine. Handwritten contents. Exterior marked with initials. EV. She traced the letters with her eyes. Evie. Elian Voss. 200 years missing. A diary buried on a world no one had reached. A message that arrived before it was sent. A route that adjusted itself to preserve something that had not yet happened. Oren followed her gaze. You think she knew, he said. I think she noticed. And decided to act. Yes. He considered that. Would you have done the same? Mira did not answer immediately. Instead, she reached for the cup, took a small sip, and set it down again, aligning it with the previous ring. Then she said, I don't know. Oren accepted that. The comm panel blinked once more. A reply. Mira opened it. Jalen priority routine. Holding review. They're arguing about interpretation. You have time. Not much. Make it count. G. She closed the message. Oren nodded. Time, he said. For now. They turned back to the screen together. The route held. The early window narrowed further. The later one remained. Between them, a space of uncertainty. Mira watched it. Oren watched her. Neither of them spoke. The station continued its quiet work around them. And for the first time since the anomaly appeared, the system did not try to complete anything ahead of them. It waited. The air vent paused between cycles, just long enough that the room felt sealed instead of circulated, then resumed with a softer tone than before. Mira noticed the change because the silence held a fraction too long. She did not look up. Her eyes remained on the route projection, tracking the incoming vessel's revised path. The line had shifted again barely, but the difference carried weight. It was no longer aligned cleanly with the early window. Oren stood beside her, one hand resting on the edge of the desk, not touching the paper. He had not moved for several minutes. When he did, it was only to shift his weight from one foot to the other. They're hesitating, he said. Yes. Not enough. Not yet. Mira adjusted the scale of the projection, narrowing the focus around the waypoint and the two remaining windows. The system responded immediately, then delayed the next update by a fraction. Not enough to register as failure. Enough to be noticed. She said nothing. Oren watched her hands. You're seeing it again. It's not repeating the same way. That means it's choosing where to appear. He considered that. Or where we're looking. Possibly. The printed sheets on the desk had not moved. The ceramic dish held them in place. The top page, the route parameters, sat exactly aligned with the seam. Mira reached out and slid the second sheet a fraction to the left, then back again, correcting a misalignment that had not been there a moment before. Oren noticed. You think it shifts when we're not looking, he said. I think it resolves when we are. Difference. If it shifts, we're chasing it. If it resolves, we're part of it. He nodded once. That was enough. The comm panel remained quiet. Mira opened the timing layer again. The internal clock continued its steady progression. No drift, no anomaly. But beneath it, in the deeper architecture tied to the old navigation module, a second sequence had begun to appear. Not a clock, not a counter, a spacing of events that did not align with the station's time base. She expanded it. Oren leaned in. "What is that?" he asked. "Not sure. Looks like markers. They're not regular." "No." She traced one with the cursor. The system hesitated, then highlighted it. A small data block opened. No label, no origin, just a single value, 0.8 m. Mira glanced at the archive metadata. Shallow burial, 0.8 meters. She did not speak immediately. Oren followed her gaze. "Depth," he said. "Yes." He looked back at the sequence. "There are more." Mira selected another marker. Fabric. Another. Ink. Another. Pressure. She leaned back slightly. "It's describing the object," she said. "Not the path. Or both." Oren straightened. "How many markers?" he asked. "Not sure yet." She zoomed out. The sequence extended beyond the visible range of the display. Not linear, not evenly spaced. Each marker appeared tied to a condition rather than a moment. Oren watched it for a few seconds. "Feels like assembly," he said. "Or reconstruction." "Of what?" She looked at the archive descriptor again. Bound paper journal. Fabric spine. Handwritten contents. "Of the diary," she said. He considered that. "Why here?" "Because this is where the path resolves. And the path resolves through us." "Yes." He nodded once. The vent shifted pitch again. The pause between cycles shortened, then lengthened slightly, as if the system had adjusted its rhythm. Mira closed the sequence view. "Don't interact with it too much," Oren said. "I'm not." "You are." She didn't argue. The incoming trajectory shifted again. This time the change was clearer. The vessel's projected path no longer intersected the early window directly. It approached, then curved slightly away, as if reconsidering the angle. Oren exhaled quietly. "They're adjusting." "Yes." "Based on what?" "Our correction. And whatever else they're seeing." Mira nodded. She opened the comm panel. Another message had arrived. Command, priority direct. She read it. Halcyon, anomaly parameters acknowledged. Confirm instability classification. Provide updated approach recommendations. Oren read it over her shoulder. "They're asking us to guide them," he said. "Yes. They trust the instability more than the absence of it. They trust patterns." He nodded. Mira did not respond immediately. Instead, she looked at the route again. The early window was still there, but thinner now. Less stable. Less attractive. The later window remained unchanged. She opened a reply. Typed slowly. "Instability persists. Early approach likely to degrade path coherence. Recommend delayed insertion for stable acquisition." She paused, then added, "Verification ongoing." She sent it. The transmission left cleanly. Oren watched the panel settle. "That buys more time," he said. "Yes." "How much?" "Depends on how much they trust us." He nodded. The room held steady. Mira returned to the sequence markers. They had shifted slightly. Not in position. In clarity. The values were more distinct now. Less ambiguous. As if the system had decided to make them easier to read. She selected another. Binding tension. Another. Page count. Another. Initials. She stopped. Oren saw it too. "Initials," he said. "Yes." She opened the data block. The value resolved slowly. Not letters. A shape. 2 strokes. One vertical, one angled. Then another pair. "Evie." Mira closed the block. "Don't," Oren said quietly. "I'm not." "You were going to." "Yes." He nodded once. The comm panel blinked again. Mira ignored it. Instead, she looked at the printed sheets. The ink on the top page had dried completely. The edges remained sharp. She lifted it, then set it back down in the same place. Oren watched. "You trust that more than the screen," he said. Yes. Why? Because it doesn't change when I look away. He considered that. Unless we're wrong about that too. Mira did not respond. The monitor refreshed. No hesitation. The route held. The incoming trajectory adjusted again. Now it aligned more closely with the later window. Not fully committed, but closer. Oren leaned back slightly. They're moving toward it. Yes. Still could change. Yes. They were quiet for a while. The station continued its small, steady motions. The vent breathed. The light held. The distant planet turned. Mira opened the personnel file again. Elian Voss. Field cartographer. Missing. She looked at the image. The notebook on the desk. The fabric spine. The initials. Evie. She closed the file. Oren watched her. You think she's already done it, he said. I think we're seeing the result of something that hasn't happened yet. Same thing, he said. Not exactly. He accepted that. The comm panel blinked again. Mira opened it this time. Jalen priority routine. They're leaning toward delay. Not unanimous. Some want to push early window before it collapses. You need to make the instability undeniable. G. She closed the message. Oren nodded. They're still deciding, he said. Yes. Then we make it easier. Mira turned back to the route. The instability marker they had inserted remained subtle. Effective, but not definitive. She adjusted the parameters slightly. Not enough to draw attention. Enough to reduce coherence in the early window further. The system accepted the change. The early window narrowed again. The later one remained. Oren watched the adjustment. That's the edge, he said. Yes. If we push more, they'll question it. I know. She stopped. The system held. No further changes. The sequence markers remained visible in the deeper layer, but she did not open them again. Oren moved to the galley, poured the last of the tea into the cup, and brought it back. Mira took it without looking, set it down, aligned it with the previous ring. Neither of them drank. The incoming trajectory shifted one more time. This time it settled, aligned with the later window. Not perfectly, but enough. Oren exhaled slowly. They chose it, he said. Yes. Verification, he added. Mira nodded. The room felt different. Not quieter. More settled. As if something had reached the point where it no longer needed to move ahead of them. Mira looked at the route, then at the paper, then at the screen. Everything held. For now. She rested her hands on the desk. Flat. Still. Oren stood beside her. Not touching anything. Watching. Waiting. And for the first time since the anomaly began, nothing in the system tried to anticipate what they would do next. It stayed. The shadow along the edge of the main console stopped short of the seam it usually crossed, then extended the remaining distance a moment later. Mira noticed it because she had been watching the seam, not the light. She did not correct anything this time. The room held steady. On the screen, the incoming trajectory remained aligned with the later window. The line was no longer adjusting in small increments. It had settled into a path that required patience. Oren stood beside her, hands resting loosely at his sides. He had stopped shifting his weight. The stillness looked intentional now, not temporary. They committed, he said. Yes. Command agreed? They didn't disagree enough. He nodded. The comm panel had gone quiet. No new messages. No blinking indicators. Mira did not open it again. Instead, she watched the route. The later window held its shape. Narrow but stable. The system no longer tried to refine it. Oren glanced at the printed sheets on the desk. They're not moving, he said. No. You checked. I stopped checking. He considered that. Because it holds, he said. Because it doesn't need to move anymore. He accepted that. The vent cycled again. The pause between breaths had shortened. The tone was closer to what it had been before the anomaly began. Mira reached for the cup, took a small sip, and set it down without aligning it this time. Oren noticed. You're not correcting it, he said. No. Why? She looked at the ring it left on the desk. Because it doesn't matter now. He nodded. The screen refreshed. No hesitation. The line moved cleanly across the display. Mira opened the deeper sequence layer. The markers remained, but they had changed. Not in position, in density. Fewer now. The earlier ones, fabric, ink, pressure, remained, but the later ones had faded. Oren leaned in. It's simplifying, he said. Yes. Why? Because the path is no longer uncertain. He considered that. So it doesn't need to describe everything. Just enough. He nodded. Mira selected one of the remaining markers. 0.8 m. It held steady. She closed it. Selected another. Initials. The shape resolved immediately. Evie. She left it open for a second longer than before. Then closed it. Oren watched her. You're letting it stay, he said. Yes. He nodded once. The route remained unchanged. The vessel approached along the later path. No further corrections. No adjustments. Just movement. Mira leaned back slightly in her chair. The station felt different. Not quieter. More complete. As if a process had reached the point where it no longer needed to announce itself. Oren moved to the forward glass. This time he did not look at the reflection. He looked out. The dark beyond Neptune remained the same, but the distance felt less abstract. Mira watched him for a moment, then returned to the screen. The archive metadata remained unchanged. Bound paper journal. Fabric spine. Handwritten contents. Exterior marked with initials. EV. She did not open any additional fields. There was nothing more to extract. The system had already given them what it needed to give. Oren spoke without turning. They'll arrive. Yes. And they'll find it. Yes. Or they won't. Mira considered that. They'll find something, she said. He turned back. That's not the same. No. He accepted that. The comm panel remained still. No further instructions. No requests. Command had shifted from asking to waiting. Mira reached for the printed sheets. She lifted the top one. Looked at it. Set it back down. Not aligned. Not corrected. Just placed. Oren watched. You're done with it, he said. Yes. Why? Because it already did its job. He nodded. The monitor refreshed again. No delay. The route held. The vessel moved closer. The later window approached. Mira closed the navigation display. Left only the clock. The steady progression of time. Oren returned to the desk. Stood beside her. Neither of them touched the console. They did not need to. The system no longer required intervention. It was following the path they had shaped. Or the path that had shaped them. Mira rested her hands on her lap. Still. Oren placed one hand lightly on the back of her chair. Not holding. Just there. The vent breathed. The light held. The station continued. After a while, Mira said, It stays. Oren nodded. Yes. They sat in silence. The clock advanced. The route remained unseen but present. Somewhere beyond the glass, beyond the station, beyond the current reach of their work, a surface waited. Silicate. Shallow. Undisturbed. Or not. Mira did not try to picture it. She did not need to. The system had already done that. And then stopped. The shadow along the console edge held its place. No longer adjusting. No longer resolving. Just there. Mira did not look at it again. She looked at the clock. Watched it move. 1 second. Then another. Then another. No hesitation. No correction. No anticipation. Oren remained beside her. The station remained quiet. And the path, now stable, no longer required them to guide it. They stayed where they were. And let it happen.